This sermon series came out of some research of our neighborhood. And one of the major questions that our neighbors 3 miles around us said is, who's Jesus? What did he do? What did he come to do? What was his purpose? It was one of the major questions being asked. That's why we created this sermon series. We know it's not complete. We could spend years on who is Jesus. But we wanted to touch on some of his teachings because they're so incredibly radical and unique. And if only we would live them, the world would be a different and better place. So it's based on this passage from Matthew. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, well, some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. The question for all of us is, who do you say that Jesus is? Who is Jesus to you? Who is Jesus to me? How would we answer that question? Well, in the first week, it's a lot easier to be a fan of Jesus than a follower. It's a much easier thing to be an admirer than an adorer. The second week, how happy are you? And I've been looking at the works of this Jesuit priest named Robert Spitzer, who's the former president of Gonzaga University in Spokane. And he wrote what's called the 4 levels of happiness. And the first 2 is where most people spend their lives, and it's the reason, he says, most people always say, well, I'm not happy, I'm not happy, I'm not happy. There's got to be more to life than this. And he says it's because we're locked into the first 2 levels. That when people take what God has given them, all that we have and all that we are, and we actually make a contribution for the common good, we move into level 3. But for the person who says it's all about me, and they're not willing to serve the common good, they never get into level 3. But level 4 is when we take what God has given us, and we're not only making a contribution for the common good, but we're cooperating with God in that process. And we have those serendipitous moments where we are very much made aware that there is a God, and we're not God. So let me give you a quick example, because this is really important. When Mr. Harden, a member of our church, was dying recently, the family called me to the hospital, and I went. And they had him hooked up to the machine, and at that point his heart was at about 90 beats per minute. And I said to the family, my job now is to help him let go. And so the nurse came in, and she had a student from Newman, a nursing student. And so the nurse said to me, why don't you teach her what you're teaching the family? She needs to know how to let a person die. So I said to this nursing student from Newman, today, now I didn't use the language I'm using with you, but I was essentially saying to her, you're going to have an opportunity to experience level 4 happiness. This will help you know why you became a nurse. And if this experience doesn't give you that deep satisfaction, then you probably ought to consider something else. Now, I didn't say that, but I said that. You know what I mean? Are you with me this morning? So, the family were all gathered there in the room, and one by one, I said, now the hearing's the last thing to go, so I want to coach you on how to let him go, how to tell him goodbye, how to tell him you love him, and you get down into his ear and you speak. And so one by one, and after every family member, it went from 90 to 80 to 70 to 60, just one right after another. It would drop 10 beats based on each person saying, I love you, it's okay to go, we're going to miss you, thank you, all of that. And then when his wife, she was the last to go, by design, she got down there and she said many of the things that I've already shared with you, and she gave him permission to go, and he went from 10 beats to 0 the minute she said, I love you. So I said to the nursing student, This is not coincidence. This is not happenstance. This is not accidental. This is level 4 happiness. When you are participating in something more significant than yourself. Now, God uses you, but you're helping this person die gracefully and with dignity. That's level 4 happiness. And I'm going to come back to this because I think so many people, any person who says, well, I just want to be happy, you cannot be happy in this life until you're on level 4. That's why there's so much searching and seeking. But I'm going to leave that alone for now, but I wanted to come back to it again because it really is tied to forgiveness. See, when you and I participate in forgiveness, we're participating in level 4 happiness because we can't do it on our own. It requires the power of God, yet we have a part to play. We call it participatory spirituality, where God is active and we show up. See, God has to have something to work with. When Jesus was feeding the 5,000, what did he ask? Did somebody bring their lunch? The little boy said, oh, I brought mine. So what did Jesus do? He took what the boy had brought, multiplied it. That's what I'm talking about. You and I have to show up. We have to offer what we have, and God takes it from there. So forgiveness works on that same principle. So the person who says, well, I believe that God is all about forgiveness, but I'm not going to do anything about it, nothing will happen. 1,000,000 times 0 is 1,000,000,000 times 0 is the power of God times 0 is 0. Are you with me? So last week, Pastor Jill talked about how Jesus calls us into community because we need each other. Have we been reminded of that this week? We had this place was completely full on Wednesday for Mike Chance's funeral service. And it's another reminder that our lives are fragile. And it's another reminder that we need each other. And that's why Jesus calls us into community. The Christian faith is very, very personal, but it's never private or it's not Christian. So today we're going to talk about the second part of the healing power of forgiveness. Now, this was the norm when Jesus came into the world. Help your friends, punish your enemies. The norm in Jesus' day when he came upon this earth was an eye for an eye, a tooth. And what did Jesus say? You live that way, you're going to end up blind and toothless. That's really true. That's what he said. You can live that way, but you'll be blind and you'll be toothless. It just plain doesn't work. So he teaches us a better way. That's why the Professor Constant from Princeton says, forgiveness as we know it did not exist in ancient Greece and Rome. When Jesus came into this world, this was the norm. There was no concept of forgiveness. So the teachings of forgiveness by Jesus are radical. They're new. They're uncommon. And for us, we say, well, of course, everybody that believes in God is all about forgiveness. Not necessarily. So, in the Scriptures, numbers matter. Now, hear this. You can make too much of numbers or you can make too little of numbers. The sweet spot is right in the middle, like most things. So, there are 8 major teachings of Jesus on the topic of forgiveness. And why is that significant? Because 8 is the day of resurrection. 8 is the day of resurrection. It's important. That's why we have in Wichita 8th Day Books, run by an Orthodox man named Warren Farha. And why did he name it 8th Day? Because 8th Day is where God does what only God can do. which is raise the dead. Humankind can do all kinds of things 7 days, but only God can raise the dead. That's why the resurrection is the 8th day. And the teachings of Jesus on forgiveness, there's exactly 8, which is a way of saying, pay attention. This is important. Don't gloss over this. Now again, you can make too much of that or too little of it, but we need to pay attention to it. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read these, but Jesus was very clear that to follow him is to be a person who engages in forgiveness. Now, I don't want to repeat 2 weeks ago's sermon, so if you weren't here, please go online and listen, because I said some really important things about forgiveness that I don't have time to repeat. But all of these 8 major teachings are up here on this topic. And I told you about Eva Kor. Eva Kor is a Jewish woman, and what I didn't tell you or share with you is what she wrote. I told you her story. She lives in Terre Haute, I think it's pronounced, Indiana. And she has established a museum. It's called Candles. And Candles is an acronym that stands for Children of Auschwitz Nazi Deadly Lab Experiments Survivors. Now, in case you weren't here, at the age of 10, Eva Kor and her twin sister Miriam were transported to Auschwitz. There, Dr. Joseph Mengele used the 2 girls, along with other twins, for medical experiments. Moses Kor, that's her, she goes by Moses Kor. Moses Kor, who speaks internationally, founded this Candles Holocaust Museum. 10 years ago, somebody burned it down because they said, we don't want those Jews in our town. It rose up stronger than ever. On January 27th, she says, I just want to read a little bit of this for you. On January 27th, 1945, 4 days before my 11th birthday, Auschwitz was liberated by the Soviet Army. I returned to my village in Romania to find that no one from my family other than Miriam had survived. 40 years passed before I spoke to Miriam about our experiences in Auschwitz. Now, did you hear that? 40 years went by, and she did not talk about her experiences in Auschwitz. Most of those twins died because of what they experienced under Dr. Mengele. So she says, and I quote, please listen to this. I was invited to lecture to some doctors in Boston and was asked if I could bring a Nazi doctor with me. I thought it was a terrible request until I remembered that I'd once been in a documentary which had also featured a Dr. Hans Munk from Auschwitz who had known Mengele. I contacted him in Germany. He agreed to meet with me for a videotaped interview. On my way to meet the Nazi doctor, I was so scared. But when I arrived at his home, he treated me with the utmost of respect. I asked him if he had seen the gas chambers. He said this was a nightmare he dealt with every day of his life. Kor goes on to say, I was surprised that Nazis had nightmares too, and asked him if he would come with me to Auschwitz to sign a document at the ruins of the gas chambers. He agreed. Now, why did they want to go to the gas chambers? Because to this day there are people who think that the Nazi Holocaust is a figment of people's imagination. There are people who believe it never happened. Well, he agreed. So in my desperate effort to find a meaningful thank you gift for Dr. Munk, I searched the stores and my heart for many months. Then the idea of a forgiveness letter came to my mind. I knew it would be a meaningful gift for Dr. Munk, but even more important, it became a gift to myself. I realized I was not a hopeless, powerless victim. When I asked a friend to check my spelling, she challenged me to forgive Miguel too. At first, I was adamant that I could never do that. But with time, I realized that now it was I who had the power to forgive. It was my right to use it. No one could take it away. On January 27th, 1995, at the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, I stood by the ruins of the gas chambers with my children next to Dr. Munk and his children and grandchild, and we both signed the document while I read my document of forgiveness and signed it. And as I did that, I felt a burden of pain lifted from me. I was no longer in the grip of hate. I was finally free. The day I forgave the Nazis, I also privately forgave my parents, whom I hated all my life for not having saved me from Auschwitz. Children expect their parents to protect them. Mine couldn't. And then I forgave myself for hating my parents. I believe with every fiber of my being that every human being has the right to live without the pain of the past. For most people, there is a big obstacle to forgiveness because society expects revenge. We need to honor and remember our victims, but I also wonder if my dead loved ones would want me to live with pain and anger until the end of my life. Some survivors do not want for me to let go of my pain. They call me a traitor. They accuse me of speaking in their name. I have never done that. Forgiveness is as personal as chemotherapy. I simply did it for myself. Isn't that powerful? Now, what does that have to do with Jesus' message? She paints for us a picture of what forgiveness looks like and why it is God's primary method for bringing healing to our lives. So you look at this next slide. If you need a book on this, Bishop Tutu has an excellent book. I highly recommend it to you. He has what's called the Forgiveness Toolbox, whereby you will get tools by reading the book on how to practice this. Now, I said it 2 weeks ago. I'm going to say it again. If you hear me as saying forgiveness is easy, it's just a matter of doing the right thing. Just make up your mind. If you hear me as making this seem like some trite little matter, then I have communicated very poorly. It's a process. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort. And most importantly, it takes the help of God. So, I said this 2 weeks ago. This is the only thing I'm repeating, but it bears repeating. Nothing is unforgivable if we take the teachings of Jesus seriously. The problem is people, when they hear that, say, well, that means all things are excusable. No. Not at all. There are people who think, well, if you just forgive because Jesus tells you to forgive, then you're condoning. No. That's why this is complicated. But no one is beyond redemption if we take Jesus' teaching seriously. One Sunday, I'll never forget it, I was telling how I could imagine that we would have 3 crosses on our property. And I said that day, you may have been here, I longed for the day where we could have 3 crosses on our property that every person who goes down K96 could see them. And that the fact that there are 3 is significant because of Dismas. Dismas is the thief who is the one who cried out, Jesus, remember me in your kingdom. And Jesus said, today you will be with me in paradise. And the reason there's 3 crosses is that you've got Jesus, of course, in the center and 2 thieves on the right. And the one on the left symbolizes a person who says, well, I'm going to do it my way and I don't need your bloody sacrifice. Thank you very much. And then you've got the other one who says, Jesus, have mercy on me. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. And the reality is there are people in our world who say, Jesus, I don't need you. I don't want you. I will do it my way. The Frank Sinatra song is their national anthem. I did it my way. Whereas Dismas, you see, represents the person who says, Jesus, have mercy on me. And Jesus says, today you'll be with me. That's why every time somebody says to me, I went to this funeral, and I get asked this all the time, where I went to this funeral when I was in college where my really good friend, his girlfriend was killed in a car accident, and the pastor stood up and said, 2 weeks ago, Annette came forward and said yes to the mercy of Jesus, but she wasn't baptized, so it's my responsibility to tell you that she's burning in hell today. Is it any wonder that her fiancé, to this day, wants absolutely nothing to do with the church? I said to Tim, my friend, well, the thief on the cross didn't have time to get baptized. Are you all with me this morning, or am I just preaching to myself? So no one's beyond redemption. No one. But we are always in a cycle, and some of you have heard me say this before, but I think I could say this every single Sunday. The best part of studying psychology for me was realizing that the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of psychology are completely compatible. That's why many of us call Jesus the master psychologist. Nobody knows how the human person works better than Jesus, as revealed by his teachings. That's why you look at this chart. Jesus knew this. Because he basically reveals to us we can live on one side of this or the other. When we experience hurt, harm, or loss, it creates for pain. That's part of being human. It creates for a desire to harm and to get even. That's part of being human. And then it leads to violence or cruelty. And then we feel the hurt, we experience the loss, and we just go round and round and round. And there are people who choose to live on this side of the cycle. And it's one of the reasons why there are so many people that are miserable. But you see, Jesus is saying there is a better way. You can make a choice that you want to cooperate with the power of God, and you can experience healing on earth, even as in heaven. So real quickly, I want to tell you, and when I say real quickly, I don't mean, again, that it's trite or easy. This is complicated, but you tell your story. But you have to tell your story in a safe way to a safe person, because most people can't handle hearing your story. How do you know if the person you tell your story to is safe? They won't tell another soul, including their spouse. And most people can't handle that. So when you tell your story, you have to be as discerning as possible about the person that you decide to tell. And once you tell your story, then you begin to name your hurt. But you've got to have the safe place, the safe person first. And then you start naming your hurt. And when you start naming your hurt, you do it without blame or shame. And when you can name your hurt without blame or shame, you know you're on a healing process. And then you grant forgiveness. And sometimes that's face to face, sometimes it's through a text, sometimes it's through a letter, sometimes it's through another person, sometimes it's going to the graveyard. I've gone with many people over the years to a graveyard where I've stood with them at the tombstone and they have spoken their word of forgiveness to their loved one. You do what you need to do in order to participate in the act of granting forgiveness. I think the sermon's supposed to stop because the clicker just stopped. And then, number 4, we renew or we release the relationship. But there's one other thing that I would add to Bishop Tutu's list. We renew, we renegotiate, or we release the relationship. There is a critical difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. It's possible to forgive without reconciliation. It's not possible to reconcile without forgiveness. They're two separate acts. Biblically speaking, we are called to forgive everyone. Biblically speaking, it's not always possible to reconcile with everyone. So, let me close. If you want help with this, there's an excellent website called the Forgiveness Project. And it is like a wildfire spreading across the world. And I encourage you, if you're in a place where you need help with this, go to the website, Google in the Forgiveness Project, and it will come up, and you will see all kinds of stories from all across the world where people are following that fourfold plan, and they're saying, I'm tired of hate. I'm tired of bitterness. I'm tired of anger. I'm tired of fear. And they're getting on the side of love. Very quickly, I want to tell you about 2 persons. First, Pardeep Kalika, Wisconsin, 2012, when the shooter went into the Sikh mosque temple and shot 6 people dead before the police shot him. He had all over him signs and symbols of being a neo-Nazi. He had on him a piece of paper that said, my goal in coming into this Sikh temple is to eradicate from planet Earth anybody that is not white. Pardeep, with his wife, his 2 children, were on their way to the Sikh temple. His daughter said, I forgot my notebook. They turned around, went to the home, picked up the notebook. They no more get in the car to go back to the temple, and they get a text that there's an active shooter. Pardeep lost his father to gunshot. Then he had to deal with bitterness toward the shooter. He had to deal with survivor's guilt. And his life just started spiraling out of control. He heard about the work of Bishop Tutu, went online and started reading about the Forgiveness Project. And he says, you can read his story online, I had to do something. I was dying inside. And then he met this next gentleman, Arno Michaelis. Arno's story is on the website. Arno was an adamant neo-Nazi who believed that God wanted planet Earth to have only white people. And he was full of hate and violence and cruelty to people, to animals, to the whole of creation. And then one night at dinner, he was spouting off this neo-Nazi rhetoric. And his mother said, Mr. Nazi, Have you forgotten that you have Native American blood inside of you? He said, what? He said, yeah, I've got your card. He left the table. He went to his apartment. He drank a beer, a glass-bottled beer, broke it on the table, slashed his wrists, hoping to die because he couldn't imagine living as somebody who wasn't purely white. His roommate comes home, finds him, takes him to the hospital. He survives. He's written a book, Love After Hate. Through psychiatric intervention and divine intervention, he came to realize that his life was full of hate because he was so full of fear. And he began to heal. And so, these two gentlemen got together. And together they have formed a ministry. A ministry united for the purpose of alleviating hate and fear from our world. If you go to the next slide, please, you will see the revenge and the forgiveness. They both moved from the revenge cycle over to the healing cycle. And with the grace of God at work in their lives, they're now participating in forgiveness. It's an amazing story. I want to close by sharing with you a prayer by a man named Howard Wills, who had all kinds of bitterness and anger and resentment in his soul. And he came to that point where he said, I can't live this way anymore. And he essentially surrendered to God. And he said, Jesus, teach me how to let go. And this prayer was given to him. And this prayer has been used to bless millions of people across the world. And as we close this sermon today, let's pray it together. God, please help me forgive all people. Help all people forgive me. And help us all forgive ourselves. Please, God, thank you. Amen. Sisters and brothers in Christ, as you feel the connection of the person next to you, may each of us be reminded that our lives are fragile, that we need the Lord, we need each other. So go forth in peace, and may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon us and be at work in us in ways that would surprise us, in ways that would encourage us, in ways that would remind us that all that we have and all that we are belongs to the one who made us. Amen and amen. Let's go in peace.
Go with the winds at your back and the sun on your face, with a song in your heart and the promise of grace. Go in peace and in truth, and let love lead your way. Go with God. Go with God. Go with the wind at your back and the sun on your face, with a song in your heart and the promise of grace. Go in peace and in truth, and let love lead your way. Go